Hello and welcome back to the second edition of the Albanach Knitter podcast. My name's Andrew and it's been absolutely an amazing week watching the reactions to my first wee podcast. You've been commenting from all over the place, you've been liking from all over the place, and you've been subscribing from all over the place. I'm absolutely amazed. It's been wonderful to hear from so many of you, and I hope I haven't missed your comment. I've been trying to say hello. I'm not sure I'll be able to do that all the time, but really overwhelming, and your encouragement has been so wonderful, not only for the knitting, but for your connections to Scotland, your visits here and your desires to visit here, and your comments on our lovely island. I just wanted to get back on and do the second episode, and just keep on going. I've been really enjoying it, and in the midst of work and all the things that happen in life, it's been great just to have some interaction to take the mind off it, and that's what it's all about. Our hobbies, they give us life, they give us inspiration, and they help us to reach out wider in the world. So we're back today. I've got some more works in progress, some finished objects for you as well, and a little bit more of the story of my family here and of the Arran Clearances, and then what I'm going to be getting up to next. So let's get on with it. Now, obviously, since the last time I podcast, which was exactly a week ago I was recording, I haven't got very many finished objects in that period of time. However, December was a really busy knitting period for me. The more the work gets on there, the more I want to knit to take my mind off it. And there were a couple of things that I wanted to show you that I managed to knit during the month of September. The first I want to show you is these little hand warmers. These were patterns by Arne and Carlos, who are one of my favourite podcasts to watch with all your Scandinavian chatter. These came through as part of their regular monthly email. It was a free pattern, I think. And these knit up beautifully. Again, they're with Worth Mill yarns, because I've got a lot of it around, so I knitted these up. And these were just sort of getting back into colour work. I did these before I finished my fisherman's cap that I showed you last time, and I was just dipping my toes in again. These haven't got a recipient yet. They're just a tiny little bit too small for me, but I'm sure there's some young hands and young arms that will enjoy those. They're very simple. It's just basic rib stitch around the edge, each edge, and some lovely white and red patterns in the middle. There is a pattern name for these, the Selbu wrist warmers. But these little motifs have a name as well, and I'll put that on the screen for you because I can't remember right now. But these were really fun, and there's several people in my family that have been coveting them. My wife had a look, and my two daughters have had a look as well. But I don't know. We'll see what happens. They could do with a little steam and a block, but they will be going to someone really fun, really nice, and actually really toasty warm. So that was me nipping into a little bit of colour work before I did my fisherman's cap. But before that, I had also been doing some more hat knitting, a little bit more adventurous. Some time ago, probably more than a year ago, I think during the pandemic, I knit the Westland Shawl by Stephen West. I'm sure many of you know Stephen West's work. He does some quite exquisite stalls, but the Westland Shawl is just a pattern with knits and purls and various patterns that you build up throughout the shawl. And then I discovered that Stephen had brought out a pattern for a Westland hat, and here it is. I absolutely love this. Again, this is a sort of slouchy effect. It fits me quite nicely, but it would have even more of a slouch on someone else. And I just love the way that these patterns, just done with a very simple acrylic yarn, this one is. It's nothing fancy. But the ribbing to start with, and then these sort of lines going off, and then there's a bit of a sort of moss stitch type thing, and then there's sort of ladders before you go back to the and repeat, and then there's a lovely crown at the top. I just love the way that all comes together. Again, the pattern was really easy to follow, and a real joy to knit. Real interest starts to come up when you're knitting something like this. I'll try it on for you, will I? I'll try it on. There we go. It looks like a bit of a thing, But there we go. It just sort of comes down past the ears, a little bit of slouch at the back. And then when you've got it on your head, all those lovely colours and patterns, patterns really pop out. And I just love it. I'm definitely going to be knitting some more of those. And I've just noticed that Stephen has brought out some socks with the same Westland pattern. And I know that I'm not going to be able to resist those. I've said before, I like a vanilla plain sock, but actually I'm so taken with the patterns that come in his Westland series, I'm fairly sure that I'm going to be doing one of those. And you know what? He's also got a sweater with the same pattern. So I think before long, I'm going to be Mr. Westland. So those are a couple of objects that I finished in December that I wanted to show you. But I also wanted to show you my first fisherman's kit. I see this is the one that I knit and used small needles. The yarn was smaller than I'd hoped. And although it does fit me, it's a bit tight on the old noggin. So my wife, Tracy, very quickly stole my very first kit. And I think when you see this, you'll see perhaps why I wasn't so enamoured by the colours that I chose for my last fisherman's kit, because I think this one for me was the absolute pièce de résistance. And that's 2 podcasts in a row where I've chosen to say pièce de résistance. I'll try not to say it again, I'm sorry. But here is my first fisherman's kit. I'll show you the band, first of all, upside down. So again, same construction. You start with the band, you slip it inside out and do the ribbing, which goes inside. And then exactly the same pattern, the Anne Sinclair pattern, but I was so much more satisfied by this as an end result. The smaller pattern here, again, smaller needles, moving into the sort of, almost like a fleur-de-lis, blue and white here, with some diamonds, and then into the sort of big X and O pattern, which is very common in Fair Isle and in some Scandinavian projects. So little blue and white crosses here. These are sort of reminiscent of Scottish shawl tires, or they were in my mind. Some little red and white zigzaggy doodah thingamabobs before doing some little checks before this beautiful red cap. I don't fancy myself much as a cardinal, just in case you're wondering, but that seemed to be the right colour. And then of course, another one of the glorious tassels, this time in the colours of the cap. So Tracy was saying to me, oh, you should show them my cap. And I said to them, Tracy darling, it's too often on your head for me to show anyone, but she's gone off tonight and she's left it behind. So I have the opportunity to show that to you now. So those were recent finished objects. Again, I do tend to knit a lot of accessories. Although I do knit garments, especially for children and sometimes for adults, I find that the continually finishing a project just gives me that little boost and that sense of satisfaction. So that are some of the projects that I've managed to finish in the last month that I wanted to show you. Next, we're moving on to some works in progress. Now, although it has only been a week since I recorded last time, I showed you the small collar of the yarn over cardigan by No Frills Knitting, designed by Meg. And I've made a little bit of progress on this, as you can see. I had started the collar last time, but I've managed to get down most of the yarn over little yoke part there, and I've split off for the arms. That's what the white wool is. The white wool is holding those stitches that we'll come back to later for the arms. And then I've started to knit down the body, just showing you the back there. That's how it's looking. You can see that it's sort of cardigan shaped. And this size, because of the size of needles and the type of yarn I'm using, not using the weight of yarn that is recommended in the pattern, but using DK yarn, again, just a very simple acrylic. This is probably going to be towards the sort of 2-3-year-old, and I'll need to frantically think of a 2-year-old and 3-year-old that I'll be able to give this to. But see, this knits up really quickly. Knits up really quickly, and it's so pleasing to be able to do projects like that. And hopefully by the next time I'm podcasting, which won't be in a week's time, I can promise you that, I'll have done a little bit more of that. Now, last time I showed you my sock, which was about 3/4 of the length along the way, and I've actually finished the length of the sock, so that's a sort of typical sock length that I enjoy. I think when I spoke to you last time I was maybe up to about here, so I've knit a little bit more of the length, and then I've done the toes, and I've even done some Kitchener stitch on the end. Now, I confessed on Instagram that I don't do that many socks, really, but every time I go to do Kitchener stitch, I have to get up a video and just remind myself how to do it again. It's not that complicated, really, is it? But just every time I do it, I just have to remind myself. And I've got myself into the pattern of thinking it's purl off knit and knit off purl. If you've done Kitchener stitch, you'll know what I'm talking about. But there's a great video by Very Pink Knits where she does a slow motion Kitchener stitch, and I find myself turning to that again and again when I've had to do it. Now, the next stage for these, of course, is to go and put in the afterthought heel. You'll see it's just a big long tube on each side, and the afterthought heel, some of you have said that that's a little bit of a pain. I don't find it to be so. I found it quite effective, and I have actually really enjoyed doing the afterthought heel. But here's how you go about that. So I've got my sock here on the table, and I've got my needle here. This is about the size of my foot, according to measurements I've done before. And what you do is you go into the stitches. Now there's 64 stitches in the socks that I do to fit my size. And you really have to go in and pick up stitches, just the right hand stitch of each stitch that you've made along the row. And I'm probably not able to do this very well live on the screen, but that's what you do. You just go in there and you pick up the right hand leg of each of the stitches, and you keep on going until you get all the way across. And once you've got that needle all the way across, you then come in and you pick up not the row immediately above, because that's the row you're going to cut, but this second row here, and you just go in with your needle, if you can, and you get in, and then you end up with stitches all the way along both of the needles there. And once you've got your stitches all along there, it's secure. And then you go into the middle and you just snip a stitch in there, which unravels it, and then you can pull the threads from each side, which gives you your hole. And then basically you go back in and you do the very same thing that you have done with the toes. So that's what I'll be doing next, and hopefully by the next time I see you, those will be finished. So a few of you have said that that's not necessarily your favourite way of doing socks, but as I say, I've really enjoyed it, and it really produces a good sock that fits my foot and gives me less stress in trying to turn a heel with circular needles, which is what I use most of the time. So we are going to look at the next part of the story as far as the Arran clearances are concerned. And we're also going to weave into that some of my own family history here on the Isle of Arran and how those two stories collide. I did a little poll on YouTube asking you what you want me to look at next, and many of you have expressed an interest in a trip up to the Macri Moor standing stones. It's a little bit like a Stonehenge here on the Isle of Arran, and we will do that, but the weather this week has definitely not been the kind of weather where you want to go up to Macri Moor, but it has been the kind of weather where I can step into the field behind my house and down into the village. So I'm going to put my coat on and my scarf on and take you for a little walk. So here we are. I'm standing outside the current residence of our family. It's not a home that we own, but it's one that we rent from a local church while I'm carrying out my life and ministry here on the island. But I'm showing you this really because up behind me, you'll see that the road goes up, and at the top there is a cemetery, and that's where we're heading now. So there we go, I've just about made it up the hill. That's my house in the background, and here we are at the gate to the cemetery. I'm going to take you in here. I'm going to show you the old Celtic chapel, and then I'm going to show you some of the family. The stone building behind me here is the remains of St Bride's Chapel, Kilbride Chapel. It used to be the parish church for Lamlash until just over 100 years ago when the new church was built down in the village. But there's been a Christian place of worship here on this site, sort of in this form from the 11th, 12th century. So this is an old established place of worship. I'll show you inside the remains. Standing now beside the grave of Thomas and Margaret McDowell. Thomas died in the year 1900, and up until that point he had been a farmer at Coughlin's Point, which is just over that direction as I am looking. But Thomas and Margaret are my great grandparents, and they were the first of the McDowell name to come over to the Isle of Arran. The name McDowell is originally from Dumfries in Galloway in the south of Scotland, and the name McDowell itself goes back to the kings and queens of Galloway. Their son was the beginning of the name McDowell. And if you've ever seen the Disney Pixar film Brave, Merida's father is based on my ancestor, so that's my little claim to fame. But Thomas McDowell came over with his wife Margaret in the mid-1800s from Dumfries in Galloway to the Isle of Arran. It might seem like a long way away, but on a good clear day we can see down into Dumfries and Galloway, and so came over here to work in agriculture, in farming, and the family had a good history of that over these years. So Thomas and Margaret McDowell, the first McDowells to come to the Isle of Arran. I've just come slightly further up the hill in the same cemetery, and here lie John and Mary McDowell. John McDowell is the son of Thomas and Margaret, and so John and Mary are my great grandparents, and they live down in Hamilton Terrace, where my great grandfather was born, which I'll show you in just a few moments. But just beside the graves of John and Mary are the graves of Donald and Annabella. And Donald and Annabella were my great grandparents. And one of the beautiful things about living on the Isle of Arran here now is that there are many people who know and remember my great grandmother Annabella and tell me all the stories and the remembrances of great granny when she was still here. Granny died in 1978 and great grandfather died in 1954. So I obviously didn't know him or indeed my great grandmother, but it's lovely to be able to hear and tell the stories. So it's just a special thing just to be living down at the foot of this hill with such a great family heritage just behind us up here in Kilbride Cemetery. It's good to be home, and as some of the locals say, you belong if you've got some bones in the ground. So we're on our way down now to the centre of Lamlash, where there's more of the story to tell. A huge welcome to the bustling metropolis of downtown Lamlash. No, it's not really that exciting. It's a very small village here on the Isle of Arran, but actually one of the places where most of the population live. There's about 1,000 people live here in Lamlash, and this place is really the heart of some of my family. Lamlash is in a beautiful bay. If I just turn around, you can see the water there, and just behind my shoulder you can see a little bit of what is called Holy Island, and that was made holy, I suppose, by a 6th, 7th century Irish monk named St Molash, which is where Lamlash gets its name. It's a beautiful place. We've got our little beach, but as I say, this is a place of roots for me. Those cottages just behind my shoulder, little white row of cottages, is where my great-grandfather, Donald MacLeod McDowell, was born, where he lived with his mother and father. And if I spin you just round again, you'll see the tower of the church there, just behind those white buildings. That is the local parish Church of Scotland building, where many of my family occasions have taken place. My grandmother was married there, my mother and her sister, and 32 people on the walls of the cradle roll have been baptised there, members of my family. So although I haven't lived in Lamlash until before these last 6 months, it's a place I often came on holiday. But it has a link as well to the story of the Canadians who went, not the Canadians, the Scots who went from here and became Scots Canadians. You may be able to see just on the grass there, I'm pointing to it now, just above my finger. There's a little mound on the grass there, and that was it's a man-made pulpit. The Reverend Mackay stood on that pulpit and spoke to all of those who were embarking on their ship to go to Canada, and he spoke to them words of comfort and reassurance as they set on their voyage that would change their lives. And just opposite from the spot where I spoke to you last, just in front of the cottages, we have this memorial to those who left on the boat and headed off to Canada, and I'll show you that now. It's a moving memorial, dead stones remembering those living stones that moved overseas. There we go. Wonderful to introduce you to the ancestors and introduce you to our beautiful little village here in Lamlash, where I have the absolute joy of living. I hope those segments are interesting. Many of you said you've loved to see the island and you've loved hearing some of the stories, and it's been especially great to hear from some of you Canadians. I even noticed some folks from New Brunswick, where those folks from Lamlash went to from the period between 1829 and 1840, heading to that area and settling and making a new way of life. You have to take your hat off to them, don't you? Going into a new land, relatively hostile territory as far as the landscape's concerned, and then trying to make a living out there. Most of these people in Arran would have known some rough weather, but nothing like the snow and the cold over there than what we have here. We're very blessed here in that we have a Gulf Stream that goes through the island. So we're actually mild enough to have palm trees that grow on our island. So those guys and girls really did a great job to establish themselves in those areas. And if you do have connections to those places, do give a shout out, and it would be great to hear your stories too. So hope you enjoyed that. Now, before we finish off for this episode, I said last time that I'm about to take on my new fisherman's cap, and that I had been buying some yarn from John Lewis. Now, John Lewis is a department store here in the UK. And at Christmas time, when I was taking my mother-in-law back to the airport to get her flight home down to South Wales, we had a day shopping, and I had a chance to pop in to the yarn department at John Lewis and bought some Rowan Valley tweed wool. Now, here's what I promised to show you last time round. I hope you can see that okay. So these are actually 50 gram skeins. I thought they were 100 because of the price last time, but these retail for around 10 of your good British pounds each for 50 grams. But because they were in the sale, they were less than £5 each. So you know what they say about Scotsmen and being thrifty? Well, I don't know if I would really buy this at full price for what you're getting, but it is a beautiful, kind of rustic looking yarn, although they're colours, but it feels rustic. There's little specks in there, and these are going to be the colours for my next cap. Also, I've got some white from the Worth Mills wool that I'm going to put in there just to give some definition. So that is the acquisition that I was talking about last time. This is for the new project that I'm going to be doing. Now, the next project that I'm going to be casting on is one that I haven't fully decided upon yet, because my daughter has a birthday coming up in a few months' time, and I kind of suggested that I may knit her something. And what I did is I sent her on to Petite Knit's website and said to her, basically, have a look on there and see if there's anything you fancy. And I think she's had a wee look. She hasn't got back to me yet. So if you're watching, come on, I haven't got that much time. But I wonder, so my daughter's coming up for 17. She's fairly slim, and she's a bit of a rake, to be honest, in terms of, you know, all that sort of stuff. Is there anything that you can think of that might be stylish enough for a trendy young gal like my daughter? She would love, I think, something knit by her old dad. She does wear some knitwear, although I'm always teasing her because she wears that kind of knitwear you get from shops, and it's like, it's machine made, and it's like, you know, it's hardly had a person near it. But I have offered her to knit something for her birthday. So in the comments, I'd love to hear any of your suggestions of a cool, trendy, but minimalist-ish sweater or cardigan that would be good for a 17-year-old girl. So give us your advice. Let us have it. Finally, just so great. Once again, thank you for subscribing. Thank you for watching. Thank you for liking. Thank you for commenting. And if you want to do all that again, please do. It's a great encouragement. I'm so glad you find a little bit of joy watching my podcast here. As I said at the beginning, I can't podcast every week, but I did want to come back to you mainly to say thank you and to give a little bit of update on some of the knitting so far, and especially for that plan for the cardigan or jumper for my daughter's birthday in a few months. So thanks again for watching. Take good care. Martian Leif and Drasta agus Biarach Bye bye.